Hello, and welcome to Her Next Step, the podcast where women in the public service talk about how their passion and their intuition led them to interesting and exciting career paths. We'll hear about the fears and challenges that could have held them back, and about the internal and external supports that enabled them to take their next step. I'm Lily Murphy, and I'm speaking to women whose stories will, I believe, inspire you to wonder what stepping stones would help you to take your next step. Today, my guest on the show is Una Parsons, Head of the Faculty of Engineering and Design at ATU Sligo campus and Head of College. Una has a fascinating story to tell about how her career went from studying toolmaking to becoming the Head of Engineering faculty and being an acclaimed member of the Academy of Engineers Ireland. We didn't even get to talk about Una's interest in gardening, but because she has so many more interests, and I'm sure you will enjoy listening to her story. Una, I'm delighted to have you here today to talk about your career and some of the choices that you've made, and indeed some of the challenges you've faced over the years. You're welcome.
Hello, Lily. Delighted to be here.
I'm always really curious about people like us, people who started their career, a number of years ago. But what were you like as a child? And so I'm curious about if I were to stand in front of your family or your peer group in national school and say somebody here will become the head of engineering and design in a national university, would they have looked to Una and said, "Oh, she's the one"?
No way. No way. We had no ambitions. I had no ambitions. And I'm sure they didn't think that of me. I was one of 9 children living in the heart of Dublin in Finglas. So next to nobody went to college. So there was no real ambitions. To get a job was probably the top priority.
And what kind of job might you have expected to get, or did you even think about it?
Well, when I was in secondary school, a job in the bank, go into teaching or nursing. They were kind of the areas people were, if they were interested in going to college, may have been interested in going to.
So, what did you do when you left school? Did you finish? You did your leaving cert, I presume.
I did my leaving cert. Unfortunately, I didn't get the points that I originally thought I'd go for architecture. I was interested in creativity, buildings, and so on and so forth. So I didn't get the points. So I initially started doing interior design in the College of Marketing in Parnell Square. But very soon after the first few weeks there, I realized that wasn't for me. So, having, realized I'd made a mistake, how do you tell your parents that? So that was, my mother was just fantastic. Whatever I wanted to do, she said, follow your passion, your interest. And I had no idea what I wanted to do besides that. But she happened to be doing a course at the time with Anco and Corla Iluna, and she came home with the brochures of options of doing a trade, which nobody in my family was doing a trade, would not have thought of going down that line. I was a maker. I sewed a lot, did a lot of precision work, sewing. So when I looked the list of all the trades, tool making sounded kind of interesting. And that's how I started doing an apprenticeship in tool making.
There's so much in there that I'm really interested in. I'm interested in the fact that your mother was doing courses. So she was obviously just an ambitious woman in her own right. But I'm also interested in 9 children and, even the cost of going to college must have been an enormous consideration. So, and were your parents educated to a high level themselves?
No, no. Both were working class. My mother at the time had got a very good leaving cert, which allowed her at the time you were allowed to do primary school teaching as a substitute. So she did that as we were growing up. But back in the late 1970s, the government was trying to get women back into the workforce, and she ran the first pilot program of a training course by ANCO to get women back in the workforce. And that's, she was a pioneer, if you like, at the time.
Gosh.
So that's how she came back with the brochures. And going to college, how we'd pay for it. I always had summer jobs, always had weekend jobs. So there was never a thought of asking your parents to pay for college. You would be covering yourself.
And did the other siblings, some of them go to college also, or?
No, nobody went to college.
Really,
No.
Una?
One sister later on in life went back and became a primary school teacher after she'd had 3 children. So that was fantastic. And she's doing brilliant at that.
Wow. So you really were breaking ground by, first of all, by going to college, but then by deciding that actually the choice you'd made wasn't the right one and making a decision to do something different.
Yeah, and just believing in yourself. So to do the tool making, I had to move out of Dublin. I had to go to Dundalk. So that was a big adventure you could look at
Mm,
the time. To do that, find digs and start off. And tool making, I was the only female. There was
mm,
16 of us. So again, you were cutting new ground, if you like,
yeah.
with the lads. Since a few others have followed, but I believe I was the second in Ireland at the time to do it. I never met the first person who did it. And toolmaking was a relatively newish trade at the
Mm.
time because the manufacturing industry was just really getting up and running in Ireland. And we didn't have toolmakers in the country. We were importing them from England. So Ireland was trying to create his own toolmakers at
Wow.
that time.
Right. And so then at that particular point when you had started the tool making, had you a sense of where that might take you career wise, or was it just you wanted to do it because it was interesting?
Just wanted to do it because it was interesting. And one of the beauties of doing it at the time, that time you started your apprenticeship with on Corla Luna, which is Sulis now, if people don't know. But they found you the job. Whereas nowadays, when you start an apprenticeship, that you have to get a job first
Okay.
with the company. So after the first year up in Dundalk, they found me a job in Braun in Carlow. That was the manufacturing company that made hair dryers and curling tongs.
That's right.
So I really enjoyed that, working alongside toolmakers, learning the trade. And that's when I came to Sligo to do my block release. You do your junior cert trade here in Sligo. So that's how I linked back in Sligo. That was 1978, believe it or not. But lucky enough at the time, Braun was owned by Gillette, a big American multinational. We all know our Gillette razors.
Yeah.
So they ran a scholarship to send somebody in Ireland to college in Boston. So I was very lucky at the time that I won that. And I could study anything that I wanted, so long as it was of benefit to the company in Carlow. So I chose mechanical engineering because it was connected with toolmaking. So that's how I started my journey.
I'm just fascinated because it just, first of all, feels like such a male world that you landed into. Secondly, I think for a lot of people in rural Ireland, they don't understand or may not understand that moving out of Dublin would have been quite an unusual thing to do. So you moved to Dundalk, then to Carlow, then to Sligo for your block release. So you had all of that, where traditionally people in Dublin tended to stay at home, didn't they?
Yeah, I love the whole idea of the adventure of trying new
Mm,
things and never being afraid to try new things. I think
yeah.
that's the key thing right throughout my career. I've chopped and changed lots of new times and started off again, started from scratch. But you're learning all the time, and that's very
Mm.
stimulating.
It's really important for our listeners, isn't it, to know that just because you started on one path, it doesn't mean that's the path you're going to end up on to some degree. Like all of us have made those kind of changes as we went through our careers, which is interesting. So just can we go back to the male world that was on and Gillette and Boston? Was it difficult?
I never found it difficult.
No.
I stood on my own 2 feet. I was recognized for what I could do. And right throughout my career, I've never had any difficulty being a female in a male orientated
Mm,
discipline. Once you have the confidence to be able to do the job, maybe at times you find that you've worked harder than others to get where others may have
mm.
got to. But I have been very lucky and fortunate that I haven't come up against roadblocks along the way because of my gender.
It's great to hear, because sometimes we hear, well, not sometimes, we hear a lot about how gender can be a barrier for people. And yeah, it's just interesting that that hasn't been your experience. Would you say you got mentorship and support from the men who worked with you and around you?
I suppose right throughout my career, I've always had a great network. And I've always looked up to and see who I could link in with to be a mentor right throughout my career. And I think I learned very earlier to have lots of mentors.
Mm,
One for the finance side, one for the management side, because you can't be skilled at everything. So right throughout my career, I've had a mixture of different people that have helped me along the way. And I'd say over the last 20 years, I've had coaches, right? Because when you get to a certain level, you're by yourself. It's fantastic to be able to bounce things off somebody and work through issues and so on and so forth. So I would be a great advocate as early on in your career to look out for mentors What are the skill sets you want to develop further? And ask somebody, would they mind mentoring on this? Be it somebody in work, outside work, a colleague.
Takes a bit of humility, doesn't it, to be able to say, I need help with this, or I don't know what I need to know here. I think sometimes people, and some of the people we've spoken to here on Her Next Step have said there's an expectation that when you reach a particular position that you will know stuff. And to actually be able to say, no, I don't know everything and I need to learn, it seems to be a really important skill to have.
And I probably wouldn't have been as blunt and come out and said it like that. What I've always done is joined professional bodies or organizations outside of work, right? And I found them really helpful. So I would have, I've always been a member of Engineers Ireland for the last 20, 30 years. And I found that hugely valuable as I worked around the world, that I could link in with people. And if I had an issue, I could call out to somebody in that organisation. 24,000 engineers and managers all over Ireland. It's a great network. You have contacts everywhere that you can link in on. I've been on the various board members over the years, been a board member on many boards, many committees and so on and so forth. And you learn on those and you link in with people and you see how they operate. So you pick up an awful lot as you move along. So I'd encourage people to get involved in your local committee where you live, or a social committee or a sports committee. You can learn an awful lot that way also.
So there you were in Boston. You had spent time in Sligo doing your block release. Was that over a period of years or was that just once off?
It was just a once off. The block releases trip typically, I think, was 3 or 4 months at the time. And then you went back to your workplace. So I was in Carlow at the time. So when I went to Boston, it was a 5-year scholarship, which was fantastic. What was unique at the time, it was a co-op university, which was unusual at the time. So what that meant is there was work placement. So out of the 5 years, you ended up with 2 years work placement throughout it. Now, the model of that co-op education, UL and Limerick copied, and they were one of the first in Ireland, and now nearly every university in Ireland has. But at the time, it was quite unique. So from my work experience, I worked in Gillette in Boston, I worked in Braun in Germany, and I came back to Ireland. So again, they were very rich experiences, learning German, working in different places, and so on and so forth. And what was unique about the university in Boston is, and I really liked it about the education system, rather than just doing technical subjects all the time, you had to pick a non-technical, a social science type of subject every semester. And you also had to pick a physical education subject. So I was doing skiing, I was doing scuba diving, I was also doing psychology. Really interesting. So they often say to have the T-shaped engineer, not just straight and narrow, that you're rounded. And those transferable skills are what we're always talking about today to try and educate, that you're just not too narrowed and focused. So I think that was a really good foundation for me to get when I lived in the States.
An extraordinarily rich education, isn't it? Is it true today? Do our engineers and our students in college get a similar kind of emphasis on their broader education, do you think?
It certainly is a criteria that Engineers Ireland, when they go to accredit an education institution for engineering programs, is they look to have those communication skills, those ethical skills, and right from the foundation to educate our students to be have more of those skills is what we look for. Because really, when you go into the workforce, you're not just working with engineers, you're working with all sorts of people. So to be able to communicate, and some people are better at it than others. So it is a key skill to be able to communicate your engineering ideas, to project manage them, to link in with different people and network.
Okay, so you were there. You spent 5 years in Boston. It sounds like an absolutely amazing experience. Imagine going off skiing while you're a student. I'm sure your people at home must have been really envious, were they?
Well, it was pre-internet, and the letters home were just magnificent. So my mother kept the copy of them all, and I was so delighted. It was like making your parents proud of you getting a degree. It was so exciting at the time. And even though I may have failed 1 or 2 modules, you'd be going back and doing your repeat and so on and so forth. But you really wanted, at the end of the day, show you could do this and make your family proud of you. So it was a fabulous experience living in Boston in different locations, and met some wonderful people there. Got to travel all over America. So it was really rich. I came back to Carlow then to work in Carlow, and the commitment was to work for at least 3 years. And I worked for 3.5 years for the company afterwards.
All right. And then?
And then I thought it was an opportunity to develop myself and move into some other type of industry and so on. So computers were just being developed. Uh, this was pre PCs and laptops and so on and so forth. So the mini computer was being developed, and Nixdorf in Bray was a manufacturer of these computers. So I got a job with them as a production engineer. So I worked for 2 or 3 years with them. So that was a great experience. And then again, it was another German company. So I had already lived in Germany for a number of years. So I had a bit of German. So I would go back and forth to Germany. I really loved that, the connection in with Germany. And Germany is so precise in its engineering and so on. So I learned an awful lot in a totally different sector of
I'm just
industry.
fascinated, at the beginning of computers, when you think of where computers have come to now, that's enormous change, isn't it, that you've seen over in that industry over the years?
Oh, it's transformed. And Ireland has always been at the cutting edge in regard to manufacturing the various things it's got involved in and developed, be it the pharma, the biopharma, the ICT sector. So it was wonderful for me to get the experience working in the different industries.
Yeah, so it's a fascinating career to date. And in that particular role, did you have any management responsibilities, or was it you were in the production side
A
of things?
combination. I had a small team. I set up the dock control department there, and so I had a team of 3 people working that. It was a small engineering department because a lot of the engineering was done in Germany. There was just 3 or 4 of us in the engineering department there. So I had 3 staff reporting into me at one stage there.
So that was another set of skills, wasn't it, Una? To manage people is quite different to kind of being on the workforce yourself, kind of.
Certainly, and like right throughout my career, I've learned different things along the way of how to manage people. You make many mistakes along the way. I suppose one of the things I did when I came back to Ireland first is I felt my education was American, right? That I didn't know the Irish way of doing things. So I did a diploma in management for engineers in Trinity College, right? When I was in Carlow. So at the time, it was kind of funny in a way. I was looking to do CPD, continuing professional development, because that was bet into me over in America. Lifelong learning was key. And it wasn't so big in Ireland at the time. So when I was living in Carlow, I looked out, well, where could I further myself? So Trinity College was running an evening diploma in management for engineers. So I used to go twice a week up to Dublin on the train. I had a bicycle in Carlow, got me to the train station. Another bicycle in Dublin, got me to Trinity. Get home at night, the train back the next day. So I did that twice a week for a year. So I learned management skills there, economics, strategies, and so on and so forth. So that was really the start of me getting into the management side of things. So that was very helpful when I got the job in Nixdorf.
I'm fascinated by the motivation that it takes to be at work full time, and do that journey that you've described to Trinity College twice a week. What was motivating you?
I suppose I've always had a drive to learn and develop, an ambition. Not an ambition to climb the ladder, but just loving learning and trying new things and so on and so forth. So, and I thought it, fascinating. My name is Parsons, the Parsons building up in Trinity College, that connection.
Yeah.
So, and just, it's a fabulous university, and to be going there, having gone to a great university in Boston and then going to Trinity College, just felt really key. And it was kind of unusual at the time to be doing a further degree. It wasn't that many people. I didn't know anyone in Carlow doing it at the time after having got the undergraduate degree. So
Yeah. You were going to go ahead and do it anyway and use the skills. I suppose that's the interesting bit about it as well, that you weren't just learning for the sake of learning, but you were actually applying those skills back at the ranch, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I suppose what had happened then, Nixdorf was taken over by Siemens, big computing organization, and they decided they were closing down the plant in Bray, Balcall Road in Bray. So I was made redundant, right? So I was twice in my career was made redundant. So you learn an awful lot when you're made redundant, and the process you go through, the grief you go through, and you're all in it together as an organization, as the factory is closing down. So that was the next stage of
Did
my
you
career.
panic?
Well, again, when you're working for a corporate, they have these supports in place. So they had outplacement supports to help you work through, analyze yourself, do some various, coaching and so on to help you through how you're going to move into your next stage. So that was helpful. But for me, it was another adventure. Where am I going on? Applying for jobs. And again, I wasn't waiting too long and I got a job in Waterford. So again, it was in the southeast, which I was familiar with. So it was a company called Bausch& Lomb. They are a healthcare company with a primary focus making the likes of contact lenses, a lot of people be aware of. But in Waterford at the time, they were starting a second factory to make Ray-Ban sunglasses. So I came in at the start of when they were creating that factory. Wow. So it was like a greenfield site in an initial factory. And then we built the factory to go out to Germany to learn some of the processes, and also over to the US. So it was a very exciting time to build this sunglass factory in Sligo.
And what was your role
Waterford.
specifically in that, Una?
I came in as an engineer initially, manufacturing engineer, to set up the processes. So the process at the time, if you know the Ray-Ban sunglasses, they have the plastic acetate frame. So my role at the time was to help the process on polishing that frame, right? So it was a big barreling process to learn the various steps to polish the frame, to bring it up to the shine that you see on the Ray-Ban sunglasses. So it was a fantastic experience.
You never think that people have those kind of jobs, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And were you managing people in that process also, or?
No, initially I came in, I was part of a team to set up the whole factory and get it up and running. And that probably took us a year to get the production lines up and running and validated. And then I was with the organization for about 10 years and I went through various different roles within the organization. It was a great development time for me. I got fantastic experiences. The managing director at the time, Brendan Power, again, he was a great mentor, helped develop me as I went along the journey in that organization. Well, I one of the interesting roles, I was a focus factory manager. So there was various different lines of production. So I managed a whole team of people for one of the production lines for the sunglasses. So you had the technical staff, the quality staff, as well as the production staff. So that was a fantastic role. But I suppose one of the most interesting roles I had before I left for about 3 years, I got a global role within the organization. So we were re-engineering the whole supply chain right across the world. So we had plants in Mexico, Texas, China, Hong Kong, Rochester, New York. So I worked between all those plants, and my role was global strategy implementation manager to re-engineer the supply chain. So I was part of a global team to do that. So that was a fantastic experience to look at how all of that
I'm
worked.
thinking of the little girl from Finglas, and one of 9, now having this amazing role around the world, and presumably getting to visit some of those countries. Did you?
Well, you'd be there maybe a couple of weeks at a time, so you would get the opportunity to link in with them. One of the delights for me, I had a brother living in Australia, so every 3 months I travelled the world, and I'd pop into Melbourne for the weekend on my way to Hong Kong just to say hello. So that was lovely to stay. So there was a few highlights to it.
Yeah.
But it's not all roses travelling as well. So, but again, the networking for me was very important. So I can remember being in Texas, and in my apartment there, and chairing committee meetings for Engineers Ireland, from there,
Gosh,
just to keep the
before
connection
remote
up.
working was
Yes,
even heard
yeah.
of. Mm.
Getting up in the middle of the night just to keep those connections going of what you were doing. So to me, the network, because it's lonely enough when you're traveling around the world, but keeping the network in with Ireland was really important.
And I'm curious, I'm just thinking back to your experience in Boston and the emphasis on being rounded and getting, exercise as part of your training, etc. How were you keeping yourself healthy and well and fit during when you're traveling around the world, etc.? Was that a challenge, and keeping some sense of the balance of life outside of work?
Well, I love the arts and I love the whole creative side of things. So I'd always seek out going to craft shops, art exhibitions, bookshops. I'd love all that side of things. But I'm also a hiker and a walker. I've traipsed over mountains all over the world. So I'd usually get up early in the morning and do a walk. That's my mental thing. And I try and keep that up today.
Wow. So you left that company, it seems, or
Yeah, so that was Bosch and Lomb, and that was another company that was taken over by another company. It was taken over by Luxottica, so that was the second redundancy. So after 10 years with them, having the global position, we'd re-engineered it that it was profitable to be taken over. So it was taken over by an Italian company. So again, going through the whole process again. So
and
at this
was
time,
that heartbreaking at that time then, or was it still an exciting adventure?
every time when you come across these things, you're looking at, well, what do I do next? So I've never looked at anything being heartbreaking. I nearly always look at the positive of things. So I had said to you, I have this creative uh, part of me. So I thought I'd start my own business and look, could I develop the creative part of it in so doing that? So I set on a journey, created my own company, had it for about 3.5 years. But so I did a combination of things. I did consultancy in the manufacturing sector with all my experience that I got globally. So that was great, sort of bread and butter, keep the money coming in. But it also gave me time to develop the creative side, to do work in areas, strategic plans for arts organizations, see what I might do. I had this notion of having my own gallery. I just thought that would be fabulous, and how would you go about doing something like that? How could you get money at something like that, and so on and so forth. So I did various different things when I was in Waterford in that area. One area I loved from traveling internationally was glass and glass art. And I was living in Waterford, and Waterford is known for crystal,
Absolutely.
which is fabulous. But there's a whole other world out there of glass art. So I had this idea of why shouldn't Waterford be a centre of excellence for glass, but not just crystal, right? So as you do with your own company, you knock on the door of the enterprise board. So I got my enterprise board grant to develop the feasibility study to look at how you'd create this international centre of excellence for glass. So I started on the journey in developing that. I then followed on with that and got my Enterprise Ireland grant. And I travelled the world to look at how glass was developed in Corning, Murano, Holland, all over the world to develop this feasibility study of what could
What might be possible?
what Waterford could become. As I was doing this, I was also part of the Chamber of Commerce. I was chairing the Arts and Culture Committee, and I got this idea of showing Waterford what I was talking about, right? So nothing was too small for me because I was used to working in a big global organization. So I brought an exhibition to Waterford of Murano glass. It was worth about €250,000 of glass, which was massive. And we put on the exhibition in 6 locations in Waterford over a 3-month period. So I set up a committee under the guise of the Arts and Culture Committee of the Chamber of Commerce, got sponsorship from Fáilte Ireland, Tourism Ireland, and so on and so forth. 300,000 people saw that exhibition over
Wow,
the
Una.
3-4 month period. So that was a fantastic highlight, just to show the city what could be done. And we had some of the exhibition in Waterford Crystal, some in WIT, some of the galleries, some of the arts, Garter Lane Arts Centre, and so on and so forth. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Gosh. And did something happen as a result in Waterford?
Well, Waterford's gone from strength to strength and doing lots and number of things. And I suppose I got called in another direction, right? But I came up with the feasibility report, submitted the documentation. I also got involved in Mary Harney at the time. She was the Minister for Industry. And she was looking to put together a team to develop Waterford, a strategy for Waterford. Because Waterford had a lot of unemployment. The docks were there. Waterford Crystal there were strikes and so on and so forth. So at the time, she was looking to how to invigorate Waterford. So I wrote to her and said, sure, I'd like to get involved. I had my own company at time and so on and so forth. So I got involved in a committee with the representatives, the county manager, the Enterprise Ireland, the IDA, and was part of a group to develop a strategy for Waterford. So what I learned, we met every Saturday morning. And this is what I'm talking about, linking in and taking the opportunities and connecting in with people to develop a vision for Waterford. And this was over 20, 25 years ago. And linking in with your region was so important. You know, you're here in Europe now, and I was just at a meeting last week with the OECD of regional balancing the regions. And so what we were talking about 20 years ago and how Waterford could develop, they couldn't develop by themselves. They had to link in with the regions. And that's what Europe's talking about. So that report, what's in it, is still vital today. And then from developing that report, because it was on the Chamber of Commerce, I was asked to chair a report for the Southeast Chambers of Ireland, how to develop the Southeast. So they were great experience to be involved in those aspects.
But what I hear is it was a fantastic experience, but also you really grabbed those opportunities and put yourself out there to say, I'm interested, I'm available, I want to be part of this. Yeah. Did that take courage, or was that just like it was a passion that was driving you?
Well, you know, you put your hand up and say, you know, and they see your enthusiasm and your interest and you're willing to help. So initially I would have gone on to maybe some of those committees as a member, but then when they saw I could do more, I got asked, would I write the report, pull together a report, and so on and so forth. So business came out of it.
Okay.
In that regard, you know?
Yeah. Ask a busy person, isn't that what they say? If you want a job done.
Yeah.
So you then moved on, as you said, you got called into a different direction. So what was that other direction?
Because it always stayed connected with Engineers Ireland, there was an opportunity for a job there in Engineers Ireland. I'd always been a member of the committees in that. So it was to be an industry director in the job. So it was sort of the second in line post under the Director General. So it was the registrar and the industry director. So I got asked would I go for that post, and I did, and was very successful. So to be part of a membership organisation, and Engineers Ireland is a fantastic professional body for its members. So the role I had was developing CPD, continuing professional development. We had a whole training program for engineers. We also linked in with industry and accredited industry for their CPD programs. I was also responsible for Steps to Engineering. That's encouraging young people for careers in engineering. So one of the highlights, delighted to say, is I started Engineers Week in Ireland. I'd seen how well it worked in the US. So I came up with the idea. So with a whole team of people, we started it. And delighted to say it's gone from strength to strength. So, all over the country, getting everybody involved and encouraging people into engineering.
Fantastic. It was just like you're just so full of passion and enthusiasm for everything you do. It amazes me that, well, no, why would it amaze me? I know you. So I've seen that enthusiasm continue through the rest of your career. So after Engineers Ireland.
After Engineers Ireland, I said to you, I have this creative side of me. So Engineers Ireland, professional body for engineers, I saw a job being offered for Chief Executive of the Crafts Council of Ireland. And I thought, membership body, similar to what I'd been in. It's in my passionate area, the craft sector. I love that whole sector. So very lucky to get that job. So I was Chief Executive of the Crafts Council of Ireland for 3-4 years.
Yeah, so Look, one of the things I just see is the connections all the way along. You know, the Engineers Island was continuing your passion for CPD that you had discovered in America. The crafts presumably links back to the tool making at some level, that precision work that you talked about and your sewing
Sewing,
when you
yeah.
were a child. And here you are now in the Crafts Council. So what was the learning from that experience?
The learning from that, so I suppose I was at a different level. I was chief executive of an organization. So the whole area of governance, having a governing body, linking in with people, managing a whole diverse team of people, and a membership body. So it was a whole different set of learnings to work in an organization like that and bringing about change. So again, when you're bringing about change, how you communicate it, how you link in with people on it, cannot be an easy job at times. It's
Yeah.
all not plain sailing, and work with people to bring it through. But I'm delighted to say we achieved a lot over that period. We brought in a lot of change, and it's gone from strength to strength since.
So just on that, that notion of leading change in an organization, is there any one lesson that you learned that was really significant that you've managed to bring forward into your current role?
I suppose communications is one area that right through any change I've been involved in, it's because people don't like change. And some people go with it. But if you don't communicate the various steps, and even if you don't know the answer, still communicate. Otherwise, it's Chinese whispers and it can go in all sorts of directions. So I've always tried to be a great communicator, be a written or verbal and so on. So that was one of the lessons. And I suppose the reason I picked up on that so much is because my master's degree I did through Brunel University, my thesis was all about transforming an organization. I based it on transforming Bausch and Lomb, that global job that I had. But that was all about communication. When you're going through business process re-engineering an organization, and that's what I'm doing now in my current job.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose as a coach, it's one of the things that I hear all the time is how easily things fall apart when there's a failure to communicate. And I think the most important point you said there is even if you're communicating, I don't know the answer. That's really important for people to hear from the leader because otherwise, as you say, they're just the rumor mill um, becomes overactive and people just get upset in the midst of that change process, don't they? So here you are now as the head of Faculty of Engineering. So that seems like a big shift from the private sector, the community sector, I guess, is the Arts Council. How did you end up in IT Sligo as it was then and now Atlantic Technological University?
Well, the reason I moved to Sligo is because I met a man.
Ooh.
So the opportunity came to make a decision. What was I doing next in my life? And I thought, now is the time to move to Sligo if we're going to have a life together. So that was a big, massive decision to make and nearly start all over again. I had no connections to start all over again in a new region. So when I came up here initially, started my own business again, looking at opportunities to, do consultancy and so on and so forth. But a friend told me about the job in the college, head of department. So I applied for that. And I had done some part-time lecturing in Waterford. So I knew what it was like to stand up in front of students. So I knew a little bit about it. But really when you're managing, no matter what area you're in, it's similar skill sets. No matter, so it doesn't really matter in one way that you're expert on the discipline or the area. It's how you manage people, I've found. And throughout my career, I've learned so much from the various different things I've been involved in. So you're applying what you've learned in different guises and different roles and so on and so forth. So I went initially in as the head of department of mechanical and electronic engineering. 5 years later, became the head of faculty of engineering and design. And in the last year, I'm also doing the head of college of Sligo as we've transitioned over the last year to be the Atlantic Technological University.
I'm going to talk to you a bit about that role, but I'm just really struck by what you said. So a friend told me about the job, and again, in a number of the interviews that we've had here on Her Next Step, that's what people have said, and it's also true from my own experience. Somebody said there was an ad in the paper about a course. Somebody, our friend, said there's a job, you should apply for it. And it was as simple as that for you, that somebody said, here's a job, and you thought, I'll go for it.
Yeah, like I would never have seen myself working in academia. It wasn't on my career path.
Yeah.
People often say, had you got this trajectory you were going towards? No, no, I did not. It wasn't on my radar to do that. But the opportunity came, and I said, well, sure, I'll go for it.
Throw my hat in the ring.
Start all over again and learn about the whole academic sector and so on and so forth. Because it is very different from working in private organizations or membership organizations to go into the public sector.
And what would you consider are the biggest differences?
I suppose when you're working to a timeline like manufacturing a product, it's very, it's very efficient. There's high productivity and so on and so forth. It's not, it doesn't, when I went in initially, to bring change about and improve processes are not as easy in the public sector as they were in the private sector.
Because there isn't the same urgency.
Not necessarily, and it's harder to bring change about and so on and so forth. And probably not as familiar with the lean techniques that are out there in industry, so it's slower to bring the change about.
But you have brought significant change, I suspect, to the Faculty of Engineering and Design.
Well, I'm so fortunate to have a fabulous team of people to work with and to showcase and highlight what they're doing. So, for instance, when I was in the Department of Mechanical and Electronic Engineering, we came up with this end of year showcase to show off all the students' work. So that has mushroomed now. And every year we have an end of year expo right across the faculty showing off all the students' work. We have doubled the number of students that are taking programs with us. So we're very proud of that in the faculty. Have 8,000 students in Sligo, but nearly 4,000 of them are in the Faculty of Engineering and Design. So that's a great achievement to have doubled it over the few years and going after new areas. So we're always looking at partnering with industry. What does industry need in a graduate for tomorrow? What do we need to be training? What do we need to be changing? So technology is changing so fast. So we're always out there looking at what are the skill sets that are needed. We work with industry. So for instance, we're about to launch a new civil engineering apprenticeship. Now, this is the first apprenticeship of its kind in Ireland. Over the last few years, Sligo has been very proactive in developing the new type of apprenticeships. We're all aware of the trade apprenticeships, but in the last 5-6 years, we've got these professional apprenticeships that are big in Germany and England and so on and so forth. So to be going after things and bringing a cohort of industry stakeholders together, say, what do you need? What do you want? And then matching them with our staff who've got expertise in that area to develop the program. So it's very interesting to see how a program, where the idea comes and then to see them graduate, it's just very fulfilling, that whole process.
Yeah, and I'm curious just about the public sector because, this podcast, Her Next Step, is primarily about women working in the public sector. I think so often there's a negativity or there's a maybe lack of valuing of that sector. What would you say about what what you enjoy about it, or what drives you about the public sector that's different perhaps from working in the private sector?
I think people are the same no matter where you work, right? But the opportunities may not be as obvious in the public sector. And you nearly have to go out of your way to create those opportunities or make it easy for people to find the opportunities. So I would say, we have a program in work to try and help women in leadership to move forward. Now, that's only 4 or 5 years old. That wasn't there before. So it's great to see that those opportunities are there. Trying to create networks of women. So, for instance, women in engineering, it's still, after all my years in it, there's still a very small percentage of women going in there. So creating opportunities for women to come together, support each other is very, very important. We're very lucky here in Sligo. I'm part of the Sligo Women in Business Network, a very strong network. Now, when I was starting my career, I never got involved in women's network, just did my work. But I've only now realised the power of helping each other, the strength of women helping women, because you nearly have to proactively go out there to try and support women to move on. and give them tips and tricks. So I always pick up something when I go to a Sligo Women in Business Network, and I'll say to them, would you like to come into the college? I can connect you with somebody. Those sort of networking things
Indeed, you
have
did
worked.
that for me long time ago, Una. One of the first conversations we ever had. There's so much more. There is so much more that I know we could talk about. But I do want to acknowledge the fact that you have recently been inducted into the as a fellow of the Academy of Engineers Ireland. Do you want to say a little bit about that and what that honour means to you?
It's the highest accolade you can get in the country in engineering. It's a body. There's only 100, just over 180 people in it, representing engineers north and south. So to be asked and be nominated to be a fellow, nominated me was somebody who's been a mentor of mine for 20, 30 years and saw me develop. And then to put my name forward and to be up there with the most eminent engineers in the country, I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, I suspect you are. And I suspect that little girl from Finglas who left secondary school and went off to do interior design, how would she be? You know, what would she say to you today?
Oh, I'd say she's chuffed.
She's chuffed. And if you were to look back, Una, on your career, is there any piece of advice that you think, actually, I just wish I had known that?
I'd say never be afraid to ask questions. You know, don't be afraid to change. I don't think I have been.
Mm.
So there's nothing I would say I wish I'd done something differently because I think I have put my hand up and
Yeah.
asked and got advice. But that's what I'd say to people listening to the podcast.
Mm.
Don't be afraid to change. The world's your oyster. There's so many opportunities out there. And just ask for advice. There's plenty of people you can ask.
So it saddens me that we have to finish. But I've really enjoyed hearing about your career. There's so much more there than even I knew. And I'm just, it's really struck by specifically what you've said, you know, that there are so many opportunities available to anybody who is willing to demonstrate their passion, I suppose, follow their heart and their intuition and say, yeah, I'm here, I'm available, I'm interested. So thank you for sharing all of that information with us, Una, and we look forward to the next development in your career because I'm sure it's not over yet.
Lily, thank you so much. Really
Mm.
enjoyed chatting to you.
If you've enjoyed today's show, do like and share the podcast. If you'd like to hear more interviews with smart, ambitious, passionate women in the public service, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. We welcome positive feedback and suggestions for future guests you'd like to hear from. Meantime, goodbye from me, Lily Murphy, and all the team at Her Next Step. Remember to look for the stepping stone that will support your next step, or consider how you could be the stepping stone for somebody else.